And good morning, everyone. It is 8:30, and we are going to kick off the Gloucester County Introduction to Exporting webinar in just a moment. We've opened it up for anybody, for folks who were queued up outside. We're just going to let folks have another 30 seconds or so, and then we're going to start this up. I'm joined today with Sophie Werner. Sophie's going to do the bulk of the presentation, just for the record, and I'm kind of like setting her up and then supplementing some of the key parts of what she said. So a little bit of a preview. And Sophie, unless you have any objections, I think we should formally start.
Sounds great. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us this morning, bright and early on a Tuesday, for our Gloucester County Introduction to Exporting webinar. We are going to kick things off with a quick poll. If you go to the next slide, please. So I just launched a brief poll. It has 3 questions. One is asking what industry you are in. Second question is asking if you have ever exported your product or service, aka sold to a buyer outside of the United States. And the third question is, are you actively marketing your company internationally, which helps us understand if we have any active versus passive or reactionary exporters, which this presentation is geared towards new to export companies that might have had one-off sales. So this just helps us understand who is in the room. So please take a moment to complete the poll. We would like to also thank our valuable local partners, namely the Gloucester County Chamber of Commerce and Lauren Seary, the Executive Director of the Gloucester County Chamber of Commerce. And we would also like to thank the Gloucester County Board of Commissioners, as well as the Chamber of Commerce of Southern New Jersey, which has been our partner on all of the webinars of our South Jersey Export webinar series. So we'll just give a couple more moments for the poll. All right, looks like we've got some service-based, other, okay. And feel free to interact in the chat. Bill and I will be monitoring the chat throughout this webinar. If you are a service-based company or selected other, feel free to drop in the chat a little bit more specific about your company. We would love to, even cater some examples on the spot to the audience here today. And it looks like we just had a couple more folks join. Welcome again. Please take a moment to complete the welcome poll. I'll leave that up for just one more moment. Okay. Okay, great. All right. Good morning, Christian. And feel free, everyone, to put your industry into the chat. We had several service-based and several other industries. And with that, I'm going to pass it back to Bill for a little bit about the Business Action Center, which he will tell you about now.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you so much, Sophie. And again, the Business Action Center, I'm not sure what folks know about it, but we exist to be kind of the central point for the state's business community. And that can be any of the businesses that are represented in today's webinar, any industries, services, by the way. I want to spend a moment. What you're seeing today for those folks that are part of a service company, this is a service. What Sophie and I are doing today is a service. And if we had, well, who have we been talking about lately? Well, say the United Kingdom. Let's say the United Kingdom wanted to log on and they were actually paying for this webinar. This service is exportable anywhere in the world. We've just used the United Kingdom. And it is no different of an export than is, say, if I was exporting my coffee cup. So those folks who are service community or service providers, this is no less applicable to you than if you're making my coffee cup. I thank you both. But we exist to be in the midst of the state's economy. Large companies, medium-sized companies, small companies, to provide resources. Sophie and I and our colleagues routinely talk about exporting. That is, really our bailiwick. But we also have colleagues who are more involved with finding domestic resources for domestic operations, et cetera. We're going to get to a little bit of a description of them in a moment. I don't want to jump that far ahead. But the Business Action Center exists to be that center in providing vision, providing value throughout the state's economy. And one of the great things about being in the Business Action Center is we have the luxury and the privilege of talking with businesses around the state. And I'm not sure, I know I didn't know some of these things existed, but there's a company up north that makes mobility products for individuals who are wheelchair users or walker users so that they can get onto the beach. And down south, we've met equally just remarkable service companies as a whole. And so we exist, or we strive to be within the midst of that and to be part of that vibrancy, so that not only are we talking with companies such as those that are present today, but that we're also bringing to their attention the resources that are available to them through other state agencies, through public-private organizations. And so it is that vision that the BAC has for itself to be part of the community, to be part of the economy in that regard. And not only do we wish to be in of it, as I've just indicated, our objective is to connect companies with the other resources that exist. Again, it could be New Jersey Labor and Workforce Development, could be DEP, could be the NJEDA. There's a lot of resources that exist in the government kind of ecosystem, but that they really exist to support businesses and industries around the state. And that's the sweet spot for the BAC, is to be in the midst of all of those blocks and to find a way to communicate, connect, and introduce companies to the resources that are most relevant to them or relevant to a given situation. And this is the BAC team. There's a lot of folks that are familiar. Just to the left side is myself. You have the Lieutenant Governor, our Executive Director, right behind, right in the middle of that screen. And this is who we are. And as I said a moment ago, the Business Action Center is composed of different units. The Office of Business Advocacy, that was what I was alluding to just briefly, and their role is to help companies with their domestic operations. And help companies has a pretty broad definition for them. Clearly we're all advocates here in the Business Action Center, but those folks also function to bring resources, both financial and technical, to companies across. And it can be ranging from advocacy with the Department of Environmental Protection. It can be advocacy with the Board of Public Utilities and some of their programs. It can be advocacy in what would be probably 45 minutes worth of more of a conversation. It is simply that broad in what they do. But again, to distinguish from us in export promotion, it is to help them grow domestically. Here in the Office of Export Promotion, Sophie Warner and our colleagues, Jean Chang, Marielle Wolf, we help companies to sell their goods and services into markets around the world. And that market can be something as tremendously big as the European Union or the ASEAN, collection in Southeast Asia. It can be something as modest as one of the Latin American markets that is rarely talked about, but that is important to a given company. So it is those aspects that this office does. And we do that to help companies grow their jobs, grow their sales, et cetera, broaden the effectiveness of being a business. One of the beauties of selling internationally is that it tends to run on a business cycle than what your domestic markets will be. So yes, you're adding to your overall sales, but then you're also adding something that should normalize or at least lessen some of the lows here domestically and give a little bit more of a reliable, steady stream of revenue. The Office of Small Business Advocacy, I posted with them. I was with them for 20 months a few years back, took a break from trade. And one of the great things about small business advocacy is that right off the bat, they have a telephone number. They have a central telephone number. Nobody else does. 1-800-JERSEY-7. And so as Sophie and I talk today, you may forget part of it. You may forget all of it. Don't forget 1-800-JERSEY-7, because our colleagues are there right now, staffing, answering calls, information, providing answers, and providing connections to other knowledge sources around the state. And then the Office of State Planning, this is the group that is marshaling through a state plan to balance both commercial development, economic development, and sensitivity to the different natural resources that exist here in the state. They are in their home stretch of getting a plan approved for the first time, I believe, in 20 years, maybe even 25 years. And then Cannabis Training Academy is our newest member here in the back. And it is set up to help those individuals who look at how cannabis is a legitimate and legal product and services here in the state of New Jersey, to provide training, as well as to provide advocacy for companies that are going down that path, opening new doors, et cetera. So all of that is the back. And as that last line indicates, most of the time, although most of the time we're talking with smaller companies, small, medium, large, it doesn't matter. 21 counties of the state of New Jersey, all those services are available anywhere throughout the state. And hopefully I've painted the picture that can get summed up in this manner. The NJBAC, the Business Action Center, provides solutions. It's not always a big moment. It's not always a small moment, but whatever the business question is, the BAC exists to answer those questions. And that's why Sophie and I are here today, to begin talking and answering questions. But again, this is how you can get in touch with us. Those are our social handles. And again, the 1-800-JERSEY-7. My colleague, Don Newman, who is Small Business Advocacy, if he's listening or if he sees this, Don, as always, 1-800-JERSEY-7, pipeline to the back. The Office of Export Promotion. Let's go forward one more. And as I referenced a moment ago, export promotion at the highest level exists to help New Jersey companies sell their goods and services around the world, and concurrent with that, simultaneously with that, to grow jobs. One cannot happen, or generally does not happen, without the other. It may take several sales before a job is created or retained, but nonetheless, we help grow jobs here in the state of New Jersey. We help grow the economy of the state of New Jersey, companies sell their goods and services around the world. We also play an advocacy role. And for us, and Sophie's going to talk about planning. Planning is really, I'm not going to say it's the only way to go, but it certainly creates a blueprint that is navigable and measurable and allows for the development of putting the company in place for a long-term, sustainably successful export run. However, no matter what amount of planning takes place, there's always a moment in which something goes awry. And I'll give you an example. I'm talking with a company who is trying to get to Beauty World in United Arab Emirates. And one of the topics that we've been talking about is this thing called a certificate of pre-sale. And although jumping miles ahead and probably into a slightly more advanced conversation, that's a common certificate requested by buyers around the world. And this office is preparing her for how to navigate that, because at some point, the buyer is going to say, hey, I really need that certificate of pre-sale to satisfy requirements inside of my country. And so we are advocates. We also try and proactively reduce or eliminate the number of advocacy times that might be required, but we are an advocate both proactively and reactively. And then also the last item on there is that foreign trade zone. The foreign trade zone exists as a way to bring products in from outside the country, provide a value add on them, and then ship those back out, export those back out. And they do that without having to incur the normal tariffs or duties that are in place, because technically the foreign trade zone is, while it's inside the United States of America, it's not landed. It's not actually been released into the economy. And so it's in this kind of almost a bubble, and that bubble is exempt from taxes, duties, and tariffs. Real fascinating topic, and I think we're going to be putting on a webinar about that sometime in the future. And then going forward, introduction to exporting. And this is where I'm going to bring Sophie back in. She's going to talk about the business case for exporting. She's going to be talking about the tools that we go through. And it is the beginning of the actual planning process. So Sophie, I'm going to get back out of your way, and you just tell me when you want to go forward.
Thank you so much, Bill. And as mentioned earlier during the launch of the poll, though today's webinar is geared towards new to export companies, resources are going to be presented that are relevant for market expansion companies as well. But we would like to start by giving you all a reason to be here if you didn't have one already. So first of all, of course, exporting is going to help you increase your sales by tapping into the over 95% of consumers that reside outside of the United States. That's a great fact, but even more importantly, 2/3 of decision makers or 2/3 of buying power, aka decision makers, are outside of the United States. So not only is there quite a lot of quantity of buyers, but also the quality, they're able to have that buying power and purchase US goods and services. Exporting can also help you smooth your business cycles and handle market fluctuations. It'll increase the valuation of your business, whether or not you're looking to sell. And then you've already invested in your production, your sales team, and your administration processes. This is a way to utilize them to their full capacity. And if you're not looking into international markets to grow, you are missing quite an opportunity for your business to grow economically, but also gain competitive advantages through insights and different market intelligence that you'll receive by being a global company. And it'll help you compete more with companies that are looking to sell into the United States, because you will have that global perspective as well. Next slide, please. So this is a brief overview of today's webinar. We're going to start with a self-assessment. It's going to be a series of questions that will also be sent to all of the attendees and registrants on today's webinar. That self-assessment, we're also going to give you an opportunity to schedule a call to go over that self-assessment with us after the call. So that's something that you can you can talk with us one-on-one based on your specific scenarios, so we can provide you even more tailored resources. We'll discuss management commitment to exporting, trade barriers and opportunities, export planning development, and all of the tools that go into the market research part. And then we'll use a case study to really demonstrate those tools. And for the purposes of this presentation, Bill and I have created a fictitious business entity, Franklin Flatbread Company, and you'll hear more about them later. And then, of course, Q&A, and then talk about some next steps. Next slide, please. So as mentioned, we're going to start out with these rhetorical questions, and hopefully answers will come into focus during today's presentation, but we'd like to kick things off just to get you all thinking about the different areas in which the business needs to be prepared in order to go global. So the first question is, are you ready to grow? So it's not advisable to jump into exporting as a completely new business. You want to have a foundation of domestic sales first. Secondly, is your company's management fully committed? We'll discuss this at length later in the presentation, but you need the top decision maker being ready and willing and enthusiastic to dedicate resources, namely time, in the pursuit of developing and following up on export markets. Third, is your production capacity ready for growth? So are you working with a co-packer? Are you manufacturing in-house? Do you have a full sales team that can handle higher volumes? And at what hours of the day are you able to handle those service calls? Financing may be needed for manufacturing expansion. Bill did mention earlier some of the other offices within the BAC. We work very closely with our colleagues at the Office of Business Advocacy that work with all of the different state incentives programs, including the NJBAC, the Manufacturer Extension Program, which is a great way for manufacturers to increase their capabilities by helping offset the costs of some of those really large, capital manufacturing investments, and those assets that will help the business produce more of the product that is receiving increased demand. Something else I wanted to mention about the financing is we also work closely with our partners at the U.S. Small Business Administration, the Office of Manufacturing and Trade. They have various financing products that can help companies basically have their cash flow be, basically to help your cash flow during the financing of a export order. So there's SBA Working Capital Pilot Program, which is part of their 7A products. But that is an opportunity for U.S. exporters to tap into as one of the solutions to cash flow issues that they'd run into. Next slide, please. In addition to the financial resources needed for increased production, you also want to look at any additional investments needed for the increase in sales, inquiries and follow-up sales, so all of that customer support. So looking at financing beyond that production, and making sure that you have the systems in place to answer that phone call from a customer on Thanksgiving that is in a market, and it's just another Thursday for that customer. For U.S. and IP protection, it's important to know that U.S. Intellectual property protection doesn't afford any protection in overseas markets, and you'd have to apply for and pay a fee for each overseas IP right that you're applying for. And definitely take note of the lifespan, because it's going to vary by market. And this is a good time as any to mention that it is much easier if you are looking to get started in exporting. Really narrow it down to a couple, maximum 3 prospective export markets, so that you can really focus and conduct your due diligence, your research, and all of your efforts on those 3 best prospective markets. So of course, you're not going to, spend your budget to apply for IP protection in, all of, Latin America and the EU. That does not, that is not going to be a good investment of your time or your money. So looking at the specific markets that make sense, and also at what point does it make sense to apply for those protections. And then finally, on this slide, looking at being culturally sensitive and also compliant to local regulations and requirements. So our office works closely with the U.S. Commercial Service, which has offices co-located in U.S. embassies and consulates throughout the world, that also work with the Foreign Agriculture Service. And those offices prepare reports that we'll discuss later today that talk about market entry strategy, local regulations, local requirements, and local preferences. And those are the country commercial guides. So those are going to provide a wealth of information. And also, I've been able to connect some of my clients with the commercial service and local offices in markets such as Mexico in order to really talk with the industry specialist about what is the on the ground understanding of this specific industry, so that the U.S. company can understand the lay of the land prior to investing resources into advertising or attending a trade show to try to find buyers. The needs, the preferences are going to vary based on market, but especially colors, symbols, and icons are all going to hold different meanings in different markets. So making sure that you are ready and able to adapt your packaging and the product itself or the service offering, if you are selling a service to that market. General takeaway is do not try to sell your product or service as is. It may be an excellent product, but you want to make sure to be not only culturally sensitive, but compliant with the local requirements. Next slide, please. So the next question has to do with getting your product. If you are a product-based business, you want to make sure that your product is able to arrive to the customer as promised. So there's a lot of different ways that you can either be responsible only until your factory door, or you could be really taking it, be responsible for shipping it and getting it to the port of entry in your foreign market. But it's a lot of small companies work with a customs broker, but it's important to know that as the exporter of record, you are ultimately responsible for compliance. So making sure that you understand the process, even if you're working with a customs broker or an intermediary, that'll help you coordinate the most efficient route for your goods. And right along with making sure that your product gets to your customer, you want to make sure your payment gets to you. So you want to ensure that you get paid. And one of the one of the tools that is used in international trade is letter of credit, which is basically a promise from a bank to another bank that's going to guarantee payment upon a certain date or upon receipt of the described goods. But one of the other partners that we work with is the XM Bank, and they are the official credit agency of the United States. And they provide export credit insurance and help protect U.S. Exporters against foreign buyer non-payment. So, and all of these resources, of course, we're happy to chat offline and make those connections and discuss those more with you all. But that is something that's good to have in mind when you think about, ensuring payment. Finally, your knowledge and understanding of U.S. export controls and compliance. As the U.S. exporter, you are responsible for obtaining any necessary licenses needed for export. Typically, most products do not require an export license. There is a very large exception for dual use products, ones with both military and civilian applications. But in addition to U.S. export licenses, you need to make sure that the individual or entity or market, so country, region that you're selling into, is not barred from doing business with the US. So you both need to look at the actual product, but also the end user, and making sure if you're selling to a distributor that you know who that distributor is selling to, because that is part of your due diligence. Next slide, please. So I know I threw a lot at you all with those questions, but as mentioned, those questions are going to be sent as a follow-up. During our last webinar, we had some folks complete it, send it to us, fill it out, and connected them since with several different offices, and provided tailored resources. But one of the common threads throughout those questions we just went through is that you're going to need a top level commitment from your top decision maker in order to move the needle and to invest the time and resources needed to develop an export strategy. So to talk more about management commitment to exporting, I'm going to pass it back to my manager, William Spear. Thank you.
So much. And this is an example of actually something Sophie said a little earlier, and that is, I'm going to put this underneath the broad category of the luxury of time. In order to prepare the company for its own path, its own journey to establish itself as a sustainable and successful and profitable exporter, you do have the luxury of time. And many things are on there. Sophie's touched on a couple of those already. But I'm not sure if there's anything more significant than having management's commitment to exporting. And the reason I say that is most companies are going to begin exporting as a new or nearly new endeavor for their company. And Sophie did talk about how there's a lot of instances in which companies, through their website, somebody from another country will say, hey, your product looks great. Can you send me that? And so they'll get the proper labeling, pay the fees, et cetera, and ship that to whichever country that may have happened. And yes, that is technically an export. You had a good or you had a service that crossed the sovereign boundaries of the United States of America and entered into another country. Technically, that's an export. Sophie's goal today, my goal today, our offices and our colleagues' goal is to have this to be a core revenue strategy, not an add-on, not, one of my favorite is, this is not a tail fin on a 57 Chevy. It is as important to the car as the engine is. It's another cylinder in the engine. And so in order to get there and in order to prepare for the journey that you're going to go through, that a company is going to go through, in which it is doing a lot of things, which is just sweat equity, management's commitment to that process is absolutely critical, because there's going to be times when, when Sophie's going to introduce some things, you're reviewing a country commercial guide for maybe the third time, and the words might begin to blur together. And that is just part of the journey. But to have your management or the owner's commitment say, yes, we understand that, but this is not about wading through the country commercial guide or going through a strategy to identify where tariffs are least or where there are trade agreements in place. Management's commitment says those are just kind of the growing pains to get acclimated. Exporting, foreign trade, international trade is a different language. It is, although it's the same underlying good or service, the manner in which you communicate with buyers around the world is going to be radically different. And it's not radically in big things, but it's radically in the kind of things that Sophie just talked about. I'm going to bring back my coffee cup for just a moment. And there's a lovely blue right in here. Well, there may be countries in which that lovely blue is an absolute turnoff. Maybe it's, it's symbolic of something that's not positive. You have to learn those things. and you want to learn those things before you charge off into a country. And when management and the owners of a given enterprise acknowledge that and they empower everybody to go forward, that's really where you're going to see companies who have an increasingly higher chance for success, as opposed to those who may be doing this for not necessarily the best of all reasons. So the commitment to management, to that process, learn and to understand that it is different from, you may be selling into Boston right now. Selling to Boston is radically different than selling to Belgium. Selling into Pennsylvania is radically different from selling into Peru. By being at the start of this journey, you have the luxury of time to understand what it means to sell to Belgium. Not only what it means to sell into Belgium, but what are the resources you need to get your product from the state of New Jersey, from Gloucester County, into Belgium, into Peru, into Thailand, into the EU, into the continent of Africa, etc. You have that luxury, and management's commitment to that process really is to pay off hugely as the process goes on. In addition to that, the management is key, of course, but then also it's that entire leadership team. And Sophie talked about it again. If ownership and management is committed to this, as it goes forward with the company, somebody somewhere is going to be tasked with taking that customer service call Thanksgiving Day as the family is sitting down to a meal, and know that in advance. And management's going to say, all right, this, we may have a moment like this. This is how we are going to respond. Or, going out to the banking partners that a company has, and says, this is where we are expanding our operations. Do you, banker, engage in international trade, international financing? And if not, who do you recommend? So that entire team of management across all disciplines, all practices, they have to be speaking the same voice. They have to be leaning into the same thing. We are all leaning into expanding our overall operations, increasing our revenue streams by selling internationally. And then once you get outside of the organization, on that third point, your bankers, your legal team, Sophie talked about IP, start talking to whoever your legal folks are, or put in place a resource to begin talking about what it means to sell what your firm's IP is, how it's treated in South Korea compared to South America. And just know that. But this is the commitment management needs to make. And then once the internally is put in place, then you begin to take on the trade barriers. These are instances that are in place outside of the country, or outside of your control. And yes, everybody's hearing about tariffs, and we're going to spend a moment on that in a moment. But there are other things that are not tariffs that get in the way or cause friction. And you want to do your best to learn these things beforehand. Well, let's go back and let's talk about Belgium for just a moment. There may be a fee required, or a registration fee or an inspection fee required for your goods and or services. That's not really a tariff, but that the Belgian government requires that. This is an example of a non-tariff trade barrier. No, it's not a tariff, as is in the news right now, but it is another moment that causes friction. It's not as smooth as it might be otherwise. Now, the flip side of tariffs and non-tariff barriers are trade agreements. Those instances in which countries have made a mutual agreement that said, we are going to lessen or reduce or eliminate what it means to be conducting trade here. And those exist around the world. The EU is a tremendous example of that. CAFTA is an example of that. ASEAN has that type of relationship again. So there are trade agreements that are in place that lessen or make it easier to move goods and services between the trading partners. And we talked some barriers. Here are some right here on the screen. Sophie said that everybody's going to get a copy of this. So, rather than go into these specifically right now, this is a decent list. This is a good list to be aware of. And no matter how much time we spend on the list, a day from now, it'll probably have something added to it. Sophie will get this, but as questions arise after the fact, please feel free to reach back out to us as well. Trade opportunities, the trade agreements, we touched on these for a moment. These are evolving, these emerge and sometimes dissolve. But these are also practices that, between countries that may benefit your company as well. And then all of this preface leads up to this particular point, and that is the point of actually building an export plan. And this is where I'm going to step out of the way and turn it back over to Sophie for this part of the program. Sophie, back to you.
Thank you, Bill. So for your export plan, here are some of the top items to consider. These items may look a little bit familiar. They are probably what you had included on your original business plan for your company when you initially launched. Hopefully you have looked at it since and it hasn't been collecting dust on the shelf. And just like a business plan, your export plan should be a living, breathing document and is of best use to you and your team as a tool for a blueprint, but also a potential tool and source of financing, because you can present this to loan officers and investors to help explain how you are going to grow the business sustainably. But it should be a living, breathing document that is not stagnant, but rather updated. So one of the just want to pull out a few items on here. We talked a bit about adapting your product or service to your local market. With the financial capacity, I did mention the U.S. Small Business Administration, but specifically there is a working capital pilot program. Again, this is through the U.S. Small Business Administration Office of Manufacturing and Trade, and they have one line that you can use for both domestic and export. So this is great for companies that are looking to start in either export journey, but are looking to still finance some local sales. So that's up to $5 million, and that's through commercial lenders. So you would have to ask your bank, if they are an SBA lender, and then you would ask if they also support SBA export products. But we also work closely with the district manager, district finance manager, and we can always connect you with her if you're not able to connect through your local bank. For pricing considerations, I think Bill had mentioned that keyword. You want it to be, you want your sales to still be profitable. So looking at the landed cost in different markets versus the final cost for your domestic customers. So your landed cost is going to include all of the different costs incurred to get your product to your customer. So of course you want to calculate that into your COGS and make sure that you still have a healthy profit margin, and you may need to adjust your prices. So your landed cost would include things such as your purchase price, shipping fee, customs duty, taxes, and other associated costs. And another thing to think about is trying to have having a pricing strategy that makes sense for multiple markets. So if you are looking at a couple international markets, thinking about making that, analyzing both of those prior to, looking at changing the price just for one. Next slide, please. So as mentioned, your export planning process is going to be similar to that of your startup business plan, but the key difference is you are going to be analyzing a specific market. So as mentioned, do not try to analyze an entire continent, or try to analyze every nation that we do business with. So focus on ideally 1 to 3. It's completely fine to just start out with one international market, but you want to start with the research process and really dive in. There's going to be, as we mentioned, the country commercial guides, which are great prepared reports on the various markets, but also there's so many tools for you to dive into the specific data of various markets for U.S. exports based on the industry, for services, or based on the specific commodity code if you are a product-based company. So that's all going to go into the analyzing of those markets. And another item I do want to mention is we also work, as mentioned, closely with the U.S. Commercial Service, and they do provide initial market checks into prospective export market. So that's also a prepared report by on the ground U.S. Department of Commerce professionals that are there to protect the interests of U.S. companies abroad. Next slide, please. And here is your sample export plan outline. We are going to highlight a couple of items. As mentioned, the export license, that's if needed. You are going to want to look at the Export Administration Regulations, or the EAR, which is where you'd see whether or not your product is a dual use for civilian and military uses. For distribution methods over in marketing component, this would be looking at direct versus indirect. So an example of a direct sale would be through your e-commerce platform. You could enable it for additional markets, or an indirect way would be a distributor. And of course, you can't accurately track progress if you don't have established milestones. So looking at your quarterly accomplishments and creating specific milestones and goals for you and your team. Next slide, please. In addition, the export budget is going to help you put all of the narrative and all of the strategy into numbers, and seeing if you can finance this expansion. At what point are you going to hit that break even? And then the implementation schedule, again, you want to be able to track your progress and communicate that with the other members of your management team. And one of the major addenda that we are going to talk about is the competitive environment and basic market statistics, which are going to be discussed in a moment in the market research section. And I'm sorry, Bill, one moment. Do you mind taking over for 1 second?
Don't worry, Sophie, and I'll carry on for just a moment. Many of the items that are listed on the screen are items that a conversation with our office would engage you with. So again, as I've referenced, and Sophie has now referenced a couple of times, these are all elements of a larger plan. And rather than go into each of them in depth right now, what I'm going to do is I'm just encourage or invite everybody, once they've received this, reach out to Sophie, reach out to myself. Let's set up some time to talk about that. And we're going to go forward and we'll do some international market research tools. Now, what you see on here is probably very painful to the eyes. Welcome back, Sophie. But what this actually is in 4 lines is different pieces, different resources to cull information that is going to directly guide or support your own export journey. And the things on here, the sources on here are all federal government level, So you don't have to buy anything. You don't have to subscribe to anything. This is all public data, which is part of hopefully what takes some of the friction out of maybe starting forward with this. One of the things that the office prides itself on is that, and it goes back to what I said a couple minutes ago, right now you have the luxury of time. You also have the luxury of not having to spend any money. This is all 100% sweat equity. And so I'm going to introduce these a little bit more. And Sophie, I'm going to, if you're back with us, I'm going to hand this back to you in just a moment. But let me talk from the perspective of who started my own journey in international trade as an analyst. And as I've joked with Sophie and our colleagues, my best friends are spreadsheets. These things that you see here provide some of the most beautiful spreadsheet data as possible. That Schedule B from US Census. Schedule B, the first 6 digits of the Schedule B are akin to DNA. So if I say to buyers around the world, my Schedule B is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Those buyers in any country speaking any language have a really strong indication of the product that I'm talking about. It gets refined after that, but that is a universal set of digits that every buyer, every seller on the planet knows about. That Census Bureau Global Market Finder helps to take some of the long nature of doing research out of this. You can begin to plug data into this, and it will begin to provide some recommendations for further exploration. The U.S. Bureau of Economic Analysis interactive data. The great thing about this is that the quality of the data is pristine, through the roof, can't buy any better. The downside of this, the interface sometimes is a little bit daunting. And I think that's fairly true of all of these, maybe not the last one, but the Department of Commerce, International Trade Administration's country commercial guides. What this does separate and distinctly from the first 3 items is those first ones are numerical or mostly numerical and statistical based. The country commercial guides are like reading a book, and not as lengthy as a book, but it is much more of an English language type of presentation of data. Let's go, where have we been so far today? Peru. Let's stay with Peru for just a moment. You know, you would pull that up from that website right there, and you would get some interesting components and really critical pieces of information about evaluating Peru as a potential market. Probably not going to sell you on Peru, but it's going to give you some information that maybe says, oh yeah, I definitely want to explore this further. It's going to give you a little bit of background about the country. It's going to give you a little bit of current facts about what it is to conduct business in the country, relevant country agencies, et cetera. Of all the things that are in there, Section 4, and this is consistent throughout all the country commercial guides, it's called Best Prospects. That's where the individual, the embassy, the U.S. embassy and or its consulates in these countries, we're talking about Peru at the moment, they compile their notes and their research on a, almost on an annual basis and say, based on our experience, this is what we believe to be the best prospect, the best markets here in the country of Peru, Brazil, Japan, etc. And so you get some real in-depth from that. Now, I want to say this as an analyst, and it's something that was brought to my attention years ago by one of our colleagues, Jean Chang. And one of the things that I've done for a fairly long time for this office and then with the state is statistical analysis. And, we do a lot of that inside the office. But Jean Chang made a really good point. So, the numerical data is absolutely marvelous. However, do not be afraid to go off script and evaluate a market in your own terms based on your own anecdotal or non-numerical basis. And it was a lesson I never forgot. And so, yes, you see a lot of things here that might give you a lot of green lights or a lot of red lights for that matter for a given country. But I'm going to defer back to what Jean Chang told me many years ago, and a member of our group now. Don't make your decisions solely based on numerical analysis. Let that be a starting point. Let that be a guide, but then evaluate on the more humanistic aspects of a given market. I'm going to go forward. And Sophie, as I go forward, I'm going to get back out of the way, welcome you back, and I'll go back to flipping pages. All right.
Thank you so much, Bill. As Bill mentioned, this may not be the most friendly interface, but this is a wealth treasure trove of information. So if you are a service-based business, we highly recommend bookmarking bea.gov, and the / iTable is going to get you to the page here. And you'll notice that there is a YouTube video in the middle of the screen. You can watch that. I highly recommend taking the time to watch that navigating iTables video prior to jumping in and going through the various data applications, because it's gonna help you navigate a lot more smoothly. Next slide, please. So once you're on this page on the U.S. Bureau of Economic Analysis Interactive Data Application, you're going to, this is an option to click here on the menu under International Data. Next slide, please. Then if you click on Interactive Data Tables, next slide, please. It'll bring you over to here, and this is really where you can choose your own adventure. You can look at transaction services. Those will probably be the most relevant to the folks on today's call. For the purposes of today, we selected international services. Next slide, please. And then once you go into international services, you can select from various U.S. Trade tables. So one of the tables that was highlighted here is table 2.2, which is going to show the U.S. trade by type of service. So it's going to be by industry and by country or affiliation. So you'd want to be looking based on the service or based on the industry. So we'd be looking primarily at NAICS codes here. Well, that's one of the ways that you can track the services on the tables. So that would be a great resource if you're a service-based company. We're going to quickly breeze through this case study for Franklin Flatbread Co. Next slide, please. So if you are a product-based business, you are going to have your first stop here on the U.S. Census Schedule B commodity data search tool. So there's two different options to determine your Schedule B commodity code. You can look through the Schedule B search engine, which we recommend, or you can browse through the contents of the Schedule B book or publication. And that is nice just to see the layout. Next slide, please. And then this is the chapter view. So you can see that each section is going to be, a different category, and then it gets more and more specific as you go along. Next slide, please. So for today, we're looking at a flatbread company. Why? Because wheat is one of the top crops here in Gloucester County, and as a soft winter wheat, some of the uses, or one of the uses, would be flatbread. We also are working with a flatbread company, and they sell it frozen. So if you type in your keyword and then click classify, next slide. I brought up the frozen piece because that is relevant once you get to the search results, because I expanded all of the different options here, but you can see it gets extremely specific, whether or not it's frozen, whether or not there are, additional ingredients, and it can also get specific to the method of preservation, based on certain not just methods, but preservation uses and ingredients. But here we're going to look at frozen pastries or frozen other. So that would basically, we're trying to select frozen bread or frozen flatbread. So that's going to take us to 1905, 90, 1049. Next slide, please. And then we're going to plug in that Schedule B, that 10-digit code. And as Bill mentioned, the first 6 of which are that DNA that is recognized on a global scale. So we plug in that information. Again, this is through the US Census. This is the Global Market Finder. And we can see the top 5 export markets for frozen bread from the US. So of the top markets, we have Canada, Japan, the UAE, but we also have Bahamas and Korea. So even though, and Bill did mention this, as our colleague Jean stated, you don't just want to look at the top market. Perhaps you're looking at a growth market, or perhaps you're, trying to, go to a place where there's not a ton of competition from U.S. exporters already. So next slide. For the country commercial guide today, we are going to look at the Bahamas country commercial guide. Next slide, please. So on the Bahamas country commercial guide, as with all of the country commercial guides, there's options for looking at the customs, regulations, and standards, an overview, as Bill mentioned, the best prospects, the best industries. Next slide, please. And here's just some great information on their agriculture sector page, talking about how Bahamas imports nearly 90% of its food, and just different proposed laws there to try to increase the local the local purchasing. So different opportunities and just awareness for U.S. exporters. This is the level of detail that the country commercial guides will afford you. And again, this is going to be a resource for both product and service-based companies. Next slide. And I see that we did go over time, so apologies. We are happy to take any questions from those in attendance. We would like to thank again the Gloucester County Chamber of Commerce and the Gloucester County Board of Commissioners and the Chamber of Commerce of Southern New Jersey for their partnership on this webinar. And please, if you'd like to stick around, if you have any questions, we will stick around for the next 5 minutes. And then also, as Bill mentioned, please follow up with us. We're going to be sending out these presentations. We'll be sending out this recording once it's available, and we'll be sending out the resources. So we're happy to provide any additional technical assistance, resource navigation based on your unique situation.
Well, Sophie, I'm checking in the chat. There's no questions in the chat. We can certainly take those on. Well, we can follow up afterwards, but right now there's nothing in the chat. And apologize, Sophie, I got a little click.
Oh my goodness!
With the one slide.
Oh no, I needed the speed. Yes,
So as still nothing in the chat, and I want to go back and I want to reiterate what our colleague Jean said. It's very easy to provide data like this, and particularly numerical data. And if you are comfortable going into another country's appropriate websites, is a lot of countries will have data there as well. This is merely aiming. It is not validating. It is saying, oh, this looks like it could support further endeavors from this company, from our company, whatever those endeavors are, maybe attending an event from the consulate of that country, maybe attending an event that is focused on exporters in your industry to network and see if anybody else is networked or sold into that market. This is a starting point. It's not the end point. I don't present it as such. I don't think Sophie does as well. I know the office as a whole does not present it as an endpoint. It is merely to start that process, and that's how it's offered. And Sophie, still no questions in chat, just so you know.
All right, so at this time, we're going to end today's webinar. Thank you so much for joining us, and we will be following up with resources and slides and recording once it's available via email. Thank you again for joining us. Have a great day.
Take care, folks.